birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Hi everybody, thanks for joining me today. It's a very dreary, rainy day in Manhattan today, but I'm kind of feeling warm and happy because my birthday's coming up in a couple of days, and I decided that I'm going to bake myself a birthday cake. Now, I don't make too many layer cakes these days, but I thought this would be exciting, and since it's a special occasion, I decided to think of something southern, because when it comes to holidays and occasions, I always think of the food that I grew up with. So I decided to make my most favorite southern cake. It's called a lane cake, and it's liberally laced with bourbon, and it's flavored with pecans and raisins and all kinds of good things. So if you'll come into the kitchen with me, I'll show you how it's done. Thank you. Whenever we're baking cakes, we want to start by preheating the oven, usually 350 for cakes. And then let's get those pans prepped. So these are 9-inch round pans. These are from Nordic Ware. They're a little deeper than the usual 9x2. They're like 2.5 deep. You could probably do a cheesecake in those if you wanted to, but they're good for layer cakes. So let's get the parchment lining going here. So just trace that. You know, you can also buy 9-inch round parchment rounds to line your cake pans with, but that's a little bit extravagant, I think. Anyway, I just need 2 today. Cut those out. Then we're going to start by greasing the pan. I use pan spray most of the time these days. You can also use melted butter, or melted shortening would probably do the best job. I don't have any shortening in the house, so you know, I don't use it, but it'll work. So fit the disc in there, the parchment. Just fit that in. Make sure that it's holding neatly on the bottom there. Then spray the whole thing, and then add some flour there, and just kind of go all around with it until you get a nice coating. So, you know, the first flour, you know, you can tap out into the next pan, and then like that. So knock out the excess. Make sure you do that. Okay, so we have our mixer ready to go. We've got our 2 cups of sugar measured out. This is the flour and starch. I'm using a combination of flour and potato starch today. So I'm adding to that some salt, ½ teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So whisk that up really, really, really well. That's important. Now the butter should be warmed up enough that it will it'll unwrap cleanly, but see, it's flexible, so that's the perfect temperature for it. So here goes our 8 ounces of butter into the mixer. You know, you can do this with a hand mixer too, but with a stand mixer it's so much easier. So get the butter creaming away there. And then I have my 2 cups of sugar all measured out. And now that's the milk, and I'm going to add to that the bourbon. So now we've got a cup of liquid, the bourbon and the vanilla. So that's all ready to go while the butter's creaming. And then let's get our eggs ready. So we've got 4 US large eggs. Just whisk those up a little bit with a fork to break them up. They'll go into the mixture faster. Okay, so that's the entire cake mixture all set to go. When the butter's creamed, you can start adding the sugar. It takes a few minutes. It doesn't
You know, cookbooks tell us that the butter sugar creaming mixture gets really light and fluffy. Well, it doesn't really, you know, it always stays a bit grainy unless you use superfine sugar, which is very expensive, and you don't need it. But you want to get it very smooth, and on the way to fluffy is what's important there. Then start working the eggs in. The important thing is that there aren't any cold lumps of fat, because that will affect the texture. But as long as the butter and the sugar are combined, and then you start working in the eggs, you know, kind of like one egg at a time, that sort of thing, you'll end up with a really nice foundation for your cake. So start working in the eggs. Yeah, that's looking nice and fluffy now. Okay, so we'll start working in the eggs gradually. And then now we have our flour mixture, and we have our flavored milk mixture. So once all the eggs are in and we have a really nice fluffy foundation for our cake batter, actually a little bit of flour. It's good to add a little bit of the flour early on there. It kind of stabilizes it a little bit, because these batters are very moist, so a little bit of flour early on will help, you know, just a few tablespoons, that sort of thing. Okay, so now the flour mixture and the milk mixture are added alternately. Start with the flour, you know, so like about 4 flour additions and 3 milk additions, something like that, until you have it all in there. And you can do it by hand if you want to. Now look what happens to this mixture. You start to get a batter that has a little bit of a satiny sheen to it. That's our goal. So go for that. Then divide it between your 2 prepared pans and spread it out. Don't worry too much about how much you spread it out, but do try to get it evenly divided between the 2 pans so that your cake layers are the same size, you know, as much as you can. You can weigh it if you want to. That's what professional bakers do. You know, they weigh portions of batter in order to get every layer the same size. So they go in the oven. So, you know, what are they going to need? 35, maybe 40 minutes, something like that. You can rotate them once. That's always good to get them browned evenly. Now, you want it nice and golden, and you want it to spring back to the touch. Test it with a pick if you want to. You'll see that it's starting to pull away from the sides of the pan. That's it. So cool it very, very well. You can do these ahead of time if you want to. Now we have a couple of other things we need to work on. We have a filling. So the filling has 4 ounces of butter and a half cup of sugar to start with. And I've measured out a half cup of bourbon, and we're going to put half of that in with the butter and sugar over the heat. And we've got our eggs. So we have 4 whole eggs. So let me get the yolks in there. And they go into this mixture over the heat. This induction burner is really fast, so this is going to go very, very quickly. So do be careful. Whisk it up well. Don't let it overheat. You don't want to scramble the eggs. And I have my raisins and my chopped pecans from the recipe. They're all ready in a bowl. And then we have our 4 egg whites that we'll use for our buttercream. So get this going on fairly low heat, you know, whisk it up, and it will start to it'll start to get kind of rubbery, like like lemon curd does, that sort of thing. Those wonderful egg yolk combinations, they get a wonderful rubbery texture. As soon as it starts to cook, switch to a heat-proof rubber spatula. There we go. They're all silicone spatulas these days. There we go with that. And as soon as it starts to simmer a little bit, you know, and get nice and rubbery, it's okay. A few bubbles are all right. A few simmery bubbles. It won't curdle as long as it's all combined. So when that mixture is all cooked, then scrape that into your bowl with the pecans and the raisins. So that's your filling. You can do this a day or two ahead, whatever, you know, refrigerate it if you need to. But actually it's better not to refrigerate it if you have a cool place to put it so that it doesn't get too hard and hard to spread. So put that aside. Just mix that all up and then put it aside, and that's the filling. So now we're going to move on to our buttercream. Oh, we also need a little bit of cake syrup. I think this is a really, really good way to do a cake like this. Take a little sugar, just a couple of tablespoons, and maybe a quarter cup of hot water just to dissolve that. And then I'm adding the last 2 ounces of the bourbon to that. So that's going to make a wonderful cake syrup that will keep our cake layers really moist and nice and give them a lot of flavor. Okay, so now to our buttercream. That's the last project here for this. The last key ingredient is our buttercream. So we have our 4 egg whites, and then here's our sugar, and just a couple of tablespoons of water, and a great big old pinch of salt. It needs that. So add the egg whites to that, and then put that over hot water and whisk it hard. I think it doesn't matter if the pan touches the hot water. I think that works out really well when it does. So, you know, just stay with it and get it done. Get it done quickly so you don't have to waste a lot of time with this. So heat it up. This is a Swiss meringue, that's what it's called. It needs to come up to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It will feel very hot to the touch, but don't let it scramble, because then you're going to lose all that wonderful puffing power that egg whites have. So just get it nice and warm. 140 Fahrenheit, even a little bit lower, 135 will do it too for your Swiss meringue. So get it nice and hot, then put it on the machine. When you first start the machine, you're going to need to go fairly high to begin with there, and you'll see a lot of steam dissipating and all of that, so that it's starting to cool down a little bit to keep it from scrambling. Then just let it work on kind of medium speed for a while until it's really fluffy and beautiful. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Meringues are so pretty. You know, you can decorate cakes with those. We have a big tradition of that in the US with things called boiled icing and 7-minute icing. It's all the same thing. But if you turn it into a buttercream, then I think you get a more reliable frosting, and it's balanced better. It's very easy to spread, and it's pretty, and it lasts better. So I'm going to start working in pieces of butter. So for 4 egg whites, or 4 ounces of egg white, about 3/4 of a pound of butter should do it. 3 sticks. You can do a little bit less, but I think you should go ahead and use the entire 12 ounces. So just work those in one at a time. Now, in the beginning, it will look kind of strange and sort of curdled and weird, but don't worry about it. It's going to come together, and it suddenly kind of it makes, buttercreams do that. They suddenly just sort of happen, and you have this gorgeous fluffy buttercream thing. So that will happen for you too. Okay, so we have all of our parts ready to go. Now for the cake layers, when you're ready to assemble the cake, slip those out of the pan, lose the parchment, peel it off if it's stuck, otherwise, often it will stay in the pan. Now, the first layer I'm going to put on a cake board here. That's going to be the bottom layer for my cake. That's a 9-inch round cake board. Now, the first thing I want to do is take a good high quality, very straight edged serrated knife, and I want to slice off the dome, because cakes that are American cakes that are baked with baking powder tend to dome. So we want to flatten it out so that we have even layers, but we don't want to waste anything. So you can just crumble all of that into your filling, and that will be very welcome in the filling. So slice off the doming, crumble that into the filling, and then we want to slice the layer in half horizontally, right down the middle as much as you possibly can. Don't make yourself crazy, just try to get it as even as you can. This is called torting a layer, because torten in the Viennese baking traditions often have very, very thin layers of cake. So we're going to tort this so that we have 4 layers today. So that's the first cake layer. I'm just smoothing this out a little bit on the top there. Any crumbs, again, they can go right into your filling. For the second layer, do the same thing, slicing off the dome, crumbling it into the filling, and then I'm torting the second layer. So when I have my cake layers all ready, then I can really start to put this together. So mix your filling, get all those crumbs smoothly in there. We don't want to waste a thing. Okay, so we've got all of our layers ready to go. Here's number 1. This is the bottom, the one that's on the cake board. Let's moisten this with about 1/4 of that wonderful bourbon syrup. And then it needs 1/3 of the filling. So spread that out. Use whatever kind of spatula you're happiest working with. The 8-inch offset or the little baby offset, whatever works for you. So spread that out. It should come pretty much right out to the edge. We want to try to get these layers as even as possible. So spread that filling as much as you can so that the layers will come together evenly. So we'll get the first one on there, and then the next one is going to be, the next layer is going to be one of those top halves, either one. Again, some of that wonderful bourbon syrup, and another third of the filling mixture. So spread that out. Then when that's done, the remaining top half from the other cake layer. Let that have a little bourbon syrup, and then the remaining filling. So now do try, as you work along, as much as you possibly can, try to keep things even so that the cake is as straight up and down as possible. It makes it a whole lot easier later on. So as you add each layer, try to keep it nice and even. Now the last layer goes on top reversed, so that way you have a nice smooth surface to apply your buttercream frosting to. So that's the ideal. So just, you know, work with that a little bit, adjust it, push it a little here and a little bit there until it's nice and even. The rest of the syrup goes on there. You want the cake to be nice and moist and full of flavor. So get that all going. So when you have everything on there with the filling and the syrup, then you want to take your beautiful buttercream and you want to spread a very thin amount on there. It's called a crumb coat. Surprise, surprise, because it's going to lock in all the crumbs. And then you don't have to worry about those when you start frosting the cake. So if you possibly have an extra 15 minutes with this project, then please do the crumb coat, and that will get things all neatly ready for your final frosting. So just a very thin layer all over the cake, and anything you find in the way of crumbs or raisins sticking out or whatever it is, just get those into the crumb coat and then give it about 15 or 20 minutes in the fridge. So when the crumb coat is set up, then now it's time for serious decoration. So here we go. So you want to start, I like an 8-inch offset spatula, the little baby spatula. Some people prefer, that's really up to you. It's your choice. And also, you know, there are things you can do with a bench scraper, as I will show you. So, and you can do some decorating with a very straight-edged serrated knife. So let's get started. We'll put some frosting on the top first. We've got that wonderful turntable, so we'll turn that and we'll work it. We want about a 1/4 inch layer all over, so just keep working with it. This is not the final time with the top, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but try to get it nice and smooth and even. And then you want to start adding frosting to the sides. So get the sides all covered, and then you want to start to really smooth things out. Now, one way you can do that, as you can see here, is with your bench scraper. Just hold it totally straight up and down and turn the turntable, and it works pretty well. But you can use a baby spatula. You can use an 8-inch spatula. Some people like plain straight spatulas, but those don't they don't handle very well for me. So you want to get the sides nice and smooth, and then you can come back once the sides are done and finish the top. So always pull it in toward the center. The little edges of the frosting, pull them into the center. Turn it, and then it will be gorgeous. Now, it's kind of traditional with layer cakes to do something with the sides because they kind of look a little plain and boring. And one thing you can do is to texture the frosting on the sides, and I'm doing that with a serrated knife, and they're cake cones that you can do it with too. But I think it's sort of fun to put a little texture on there, like kind of like Austrian shades. So it's, you go up and down as you, just a little bit as you move around with that. Get it as neat as you can. And if you don't want to decorate the sides, then don't. So the rest of the buttercream goes into a pastry bag to do a little bit of decoration. And I have a very plain star tip here. And I decided that since it's not going to be 16 candles for me, this cake is still going to be 16 portions. I think it's a rich cake. So I put my little rosettes of frosting there, and I saved some really pretty pecan halves to decorate them with, and one in the middle. And then I'm also doing a tiny little rosette of frosting and another pecan at the bottom edge, because it's nice to do something on the bottom edge to mark each portion too. So we've got our 16 portions, and there's our cake. Now this needs to rest and chill, I think, ideally, unless you have a nice cool place to leave it, but I think the refrigerator's ideal. And it should have a day to settle in so that all those flavors can settle in throughout the cake, and it will be much better the next day. So put that away if you can bear to wait. It'll also be good right away, but put it away if you can in the fridge. And there's Lane cake, my way. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being with me today, and thank you for helping me celebrate my birthday. I'm delighted you're here. The recipe is at brucebeckinthekitchen.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'd love to have your feedback on this. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.